Sterling University was a place where dreams were made, or so the brochure said. Nestled in the heart of a bustling city, its ivy-covered buildings and manicured lawns whispered tales of academic excellence. For decades, it had been known as one of the most prestigious institutions in the country, attracting students from all over the world who sought to make their mark. But beneath its polished exterior lay a culture steeped in tradition and sometimes exclusion. Layla Thompson stepped onto campus for the first time on a crisp autumn morning. The air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves, and the sunlight filtered through the towering trees that lined the pathways. She clutched her backpack tightly, feeling both excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. This was her chance, a ticket to a brighter future, not just for herself, but for her family too. Her parents had worked tirelessly to give her every opportunity they never had, and now she was here, ready to seize it. But Layla knew this wouldn't be easy. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she'd always stood out, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't help it. Math came naturally to her like breathing. While other kids struggled with multiplication tables, Layla devoured textbooks meant for older students. By high school, she was solving equations that left teachers scratching their heads. Yet, despite her brilliance, there were moments when she felt like an outsider. People often assumed she didn't belong in advanced classes or questioned how someone like her could excel in such a challenging subject. At Sterling University, those doubts followed her like shadows. From the moment she walked into orientation, she noticed the subtle glances, the hushed conversations. Some students greeted her warmly, but others seemed skeptical, as if trying to figure out what she was doing there. And then there were the professors, particularly Dr. Marcus Hale and Professor Evelyn Cross. Dr. Hale was a man in his late 50s with a reputation for being brilliant but intimidating. His lectures were legendary, filled with rapid-fire questions designed to weed out anyone who wasn't serious enough about mathematics. He prided himself on maintaining what he called the highest standards, though some whispered that his standards included more than just intellect. Next to him was Professor Cross, a sharp-tongued woman in her 40s who believed strongly in the idea of natural talent. She often spoke about how certain individuals were simply born with the ability to grasp complex concepts, implying that others weren't cut out for fields like calculus. Neither of them paid much attention to Layla at first. To them, she was just another name on the roster, another face in the crowd. But when they read her application essay, a heartfelt piece about using math to solve real-world problems, they exchanged raised eyebrows. The essay talked about how numbers could bridge gaps between communities, how equations could model solutions for social issues. It was passionate, creative, and deeply personal. But instead of seeing potential, Dr. Hale and Professor Cross dismissed it as naive idealism. They assumed Layla had been admitted due to affirmative action policies rather than her own merit. There, skepticism grew during the first few weeks of class. Layla rarely spoke unless called upon, preferring to listen and observe. When she did answer questions, her responses were concise yet insightful, leaving little room for doubt about her understanding of the material. Still, Dr. Hale and Professor Cross remained unconvinced. They chalked her success up to luck or memorization, refusing to believe she possessed genuine mathematical intuition. Meanwhile, Layla tried to focus on her studies. She spent hours in the library poring over textbooks, scribbling notes in the margins, and practicing problems until her hand cramped. Late at night, while other students attended parties or binge-watched shows, she sat at her desk with a cup of tea, working through proofs and derivations. Mathematics wasn't just a subject for her, it was a language, a way of making sense of the world. Every equation she solved felt like unlocking a new door, revealing something beautiful and profound. Yet no matter how hard she worked, she couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. In class, she sometimes caught Dr. Hale staring at her, his expression unreadable. During office hours, Professor Cross would ask pointed questions, testing her knowledge in ways that felt almost confrontational. Layla brushed it off, telling herself it was part of the learning process. After all, Sterling University was supposed to challenge its students. That's what made it great, right? What Layla didn't realize was that these interactions weren't random. Behind closed doors, Dr. Hale and Professor Cross had begun discussing her. They viewed her presence in the program as a threat to the status quo, a disruption to the carefully curated image of academic elitism they cherished. They saw themselves as gatekeepers, tasked with preserving the integrity of their field. And in their minds, someone like Layla, a young black woman from a humble background, didn't fit the mold. It wasn't long before they decided to act. Convinced that Layla's performance was a facade, they began planning a way to expose her. They wanted to prove to themselves and everyone else that she wasn't as capable as she seemed. What they didn't know was that their plan would backfire spectacularly, setting the stage for a story that would change not only Layla's life but also the very institution they sought to protect. Little did they know, Layla wasn't just good. At math, she was extraordinary, and when the time came for her to step into the spotlight, she would do so with grace, intelligence, and an unshakable belief in herself. The weeks passed quickly at Sterling University, and the initial buzz of a new semester began to fade. Classes settled into their usual rhythm, with professors lecturing, students scribbling notes, and the hum of intellectual energy filling the air. For Layla Thompson, life revolved around her studies. Early mornings spent reviewing equations, afternoons attending lectures, and late nights buried in textbooks. She was determined to prove herself, not just to others but also to herself. Yet despite her relentless focus, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. Dr. Marcus Hale and Professor Evelyn Cross had been watching her closely, their curiosity morphing into something more sinister. They convinced themselves that Layla's success so far was a fluke, a result of rote memorization or external help, rather than genuine understanding. To them, her presence in the advanced calculus program felt like an anomaly, an intrusion into a space they believed should be reserved for only the most elite minds. Their pride wouldn't allow them to accept that someone like Layla could truly excel without some kind of special treatment. One afternoon, as Dr. Hale sipped his coffee in the faculty lounge, he broached the topic with Professor Cross. "I think it's time we put her to the test," he said casually, though there was a glint of mischief in his eyes. "If she's as capable as she claims to be, then she'll have no trouble handling a real challenge." Professor Cross raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a mix of skepticism and anticipation. Dr. Hale smirked, pulling out a journal article from his briefcase. It contained a theorem that had baffled even seasoned mathematicians for years. The problem was complex, layered with abstract concepts and requiring a level of creativity that few possessed. "This," he said, tapping the page emphatically. "Let's see if she can solve this during one of our sessions. We'll frame it as an exercise in critical thinking, of course. No need to make it obvious." Professor Cross nodded slowly, a smile playing on her lips. "Perfect. If she fails, and she will, it'll confirm what we already suspect. And if by some miracle she succeeds..." She trailed off, shaking her head dismissively. "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves." Their plan came together swiftly. Under the guise of fostering intellectual growth, they scheduled a live problem-solving session for the entire department. These events were common at Sterling University, designed to encourage collaboration and showcase talent. Students and faculty alike would gather in the main lecture hall, where participants would tackle challenging problems on the chalkboard while everyone watched. It was meant to be a celebration of learning, but in this case, it would serve a darker purpose. When the day arrived, Layla walked into the lecture hall unaware of the storm awaiting her. She had heard about the session earlier in the week and assumed it would be like any other academic exercise, a chance to engage with difficult material and learn from others. As she took her seat among her classmates, she noticed an unusual tension in the room. The professors seemed unusually animated, exchanging knowing glances and whispering quietly. Some of the students appeared uneasy, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Layla brushed it off, attributing the atmosphere to pre-session nerves. Dr. Hale stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat to capture everyone's attention. Good afternoon, everyone, he began, his voice smooth and authoritative. Today we have a special opportunity to explore a particularly intriguing problem, one that has eluded even the brightest minds in our field. He paused dramatically, letting his words sink in. We've invited one of our own to take on this challenge. Let's give a warm welcome to Layla Thompson. A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience as all eyes turned to Layla. She blinked in surprise, momentarily caught off guard. While she appreciated being recognized, she hadn't expected to be singled out in such a public setting. Still, she rose from her seat with quiet confidence, offering a polite smile as she made her way to the front of the room. Professor Cross handed her a sheet of paper containing the problem. Layla scanned it briefly, her brow furrowing as she processed the complexity of the theorem. It was unlike anything she'd encountered before, a labyrinth of symbols and variables that required deep analytical thought. But instead of feeling intimidated, she felt a spark of excitement. This was exactly the kind of challenge she lived for, the kind that pushed her to think beyond conventional boundaries. Take your time, Dr. Hale said, his tone deceptively encouraging. Feel free to use the board to work through your reasoning. Layla nodded, stepping up to the chalkboard. She picked up a piece of chalk and began writing, her movements steady and deliberate. At first, the room was silent, save for the soft scratching of chalk against the board. Then, as Layla started breaking down the problem into manageable parts, the atmosphere shifted. People leaned forward in their seats, their expressions ranging from curiosity to awe. Even those who had doubted her couldn't help but be drawn in by the clarity of her approach. Dr. Hale and Professor Cross exchanged uneasy glances. They had anticipated confusion, hesitation, maybe even panic. Instead, Layla was unraveling the problem with a precision that bordered on brilliance. She identified patterns, connected disparate ideas, and applied principles in ways that left even seasoned mathematicians marveling. Every step she took brought her closer to a solution, and with each passing moment, the tension in the room grew palpable. As Layla neared the final stages of her explanation, the murmurs escalated into outright astonishment. Students whispered to one another, pointing at the board in disbelief. Faculty members exchanged looks of admiration mixed with embarrassment. Dr. Hale and Professor Cross, however, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Their carefully constructed plan was unraveling before their very eyes, exposing not only their biases but also their underestimation of Layla's abilities. Finally, Layla reached the conclusion, writing the solution on the board with a flourish. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then, as the implications of what she had accomplished sank in, applause erupted, loud, spontaneous, and heartfelt. Layla turned to face the audience, her expression calm but tinged with satisfaction. She hadn't done this for recognition. She had simply followed her passion for mathematics. But seeing the reaction of her peers filled her with a sense of validation she hadn't realized she needed. Dr. Hale and Professor Cross stood frozen, their faces masks of disbelief. They had set out to humiliate Layla, to prove that she didn't belong in their hallowed halls. Instead, they had witnessed something extraordinary, a display of intellectual prowess that defied every stereotype they held. In that moment, the truth became undeniable. Layla Thompson wasn't just good at math. She was exceptional. And yet, even as the applause continued, Layla remained humble. She thanked the audience briefly before returning to her seat, her focus already shifting back to the next chapter of her journey. Little did she know, this event would mark a turning point, not just for her but for the entire university. The seeds of change had been planted, and they would soon grow into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The applause in the lecture hall lingered like an echo, reverberating through the room long after Layla had returned to her seat. The energy was electric, charged with a mix of admiration, disbelief, and even a hint of unease. For many students, it was a moment of pure inspiration, a reminder that brilliance could come from anywhere, regardless of background or appearance. But for Dr. Marcus Hale and Professor Evelyn Cross, it was something else entirely. a moment of reckoning. As the initial excitement began to settle, whispers spread like wildfire among the audience. "Did you see that?" one student asked another, his voice tinged with awe. "She solved it so fast I didn't even understand half of what she wrote." Nearby, a group of graduate students huddled together, their faces glowing with respect. "That was incredible," one of them murmured. "I've been stuck on that theorem for months and she just cracked it." Layla, meanwhile, sat quietly at her desk, avoiding eye contact as the spotlight remained trained on her. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and while she appreciated the validation, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. Something about the situation felt off, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The professor's behavior during the session had struck her as odd. Their forced smiles, the way they exchanged glances when she started solving the problem, but she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the work ahead. Dr. Hale and Professor Cross, however, were far from composed. As the applause died down, they stood frozen near the podium, their expressions unreadable, but their discomfort palpable. They had expected confusion, frustration, maybe even tears. Instead, they had witnessed a masterclass in mathematical reasoning, a performance so flawless it left no room for doubt about Layla's abilities. Their plan to humiliate her had backfired spectacularly, and now they were faced with the consequences of their actions. Professor Cross was the first to break the silence. Clearing her throat nervously, she stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Well, that was certainly impressive," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It seems we underestimated your skills. Miss Thompson, congratulations on tackling such a challenging problem." Her words hung awkwardly in the air, met with a mixture of polite nods and skeptical stares from the audience. Some students exchanged knowing looks, sensing the insincerity behind her praise. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, aware that something deeper was at play. Dr. Hale, still reeling from the shock of Layla's success, chimed in hesitantly. "Yes, very impressive indeed," he echoed, his tone measured but strained. "Perhaps we should all take a moment to reflect on how much there is to learn from each other." But the damage was done. The cracks in their facade were beginning to show, and the audience wasn't blind to it. Layla's peers had seen the subtle jabs, the dismissive remarks, the thinly veiled attempts to undermine her confidence over the past few weeks. Now, witnessing her triumph, they couldn't help but question the motivations of the very people who were supposed to guide and support them. After the session ended, the buzz only grew louder. Students spilled out into the hallway, animatedly discussing what had just happened. Social media lit up with posts and videos capturing Layla's solution, spreading the story far beyond the confines of Sterling University. Comments poured in, from across the country, praising her intellect and resilience. Some alumni weighed in, expressing pride in seeing a fellow student excel despite adversity. Others called out the university for allowing bias to fester within its walls. For Layla, the aftermath was overwhelming. Messages flooded her inbox, some congratulatory, others offering advice or sharing personal stories of overcoming discrimination. Friends and classmates approached her between classes, eager to congratulate her and express their support. But amidst the praise, there were also moments of reflection. Layla found herself thinking about the systemic barriers that had led to this moment, the assumptions, the stereotypes, the constant need to prove herself in spaces where she was made to feel like an outsider. Despite the chaos swirling around Layla remained grounded. She knew better than to let the attention go to her head. Humility had always been one of her defining traits. Still, she couldn't ignore the significance of what had happened. Her success hadn't just been about solving a difficult equation. It had been about challenging perceptions, breaking down walls, and proving that talent knows no boundaries. Back in the faculty offices, tension simmered beneath the surface. Dr. Hale and Professor Cross retreated to a private meeting room, closing the door firmly behind them. Neither spoke for several minutes, the weight of their failure hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Professor Cross broke the silence. "We underestimated her," she admitted grudgingly, her voice low. I never thought she'd actually be able to solve it. Dr. Hale nodded slowly, his usual arrogance replaced by a rare flicker of self-doubt. This is bad, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. If word gets out about what we did, it already has, Professor, Cross interrupted sharply. You saw the phone's recording during the session. By tomorrow morning this will be all over the news. We're going to have to answer for this. Their conversation turned frantic as they scrambled to figure out their next move. Should they deny any wrongdoing, apologize publicly and risk tarnishing their reputations, or try to shift the narrative, framing the event as a harmless exercise gone awry? Each option seemed worse than the last, leaving them trapped in a web of their own making. Meanwhile, the rest of the faculty grappled with their own reactions. Some were genuinely impressed by Layla's achievement, recognizing it as a testament to her hard work and natural ability. Others, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, that two senior professors had allowed their biases to cloud their judgment. Discussions erupted in the staff lounge with opinions divided and emotions running high. By the end of the day, the story had reached the ears of Sterling University's administration. The dean summoned Dr. Hale and Professor Cross to his office, demanding an explanation for their conduct. His tone was stern, his expression grim. "What exactly were you thinking?" he demanded, slamming a printed copy of a viral tweet onto his desk. The post featured a clip of Layla solving the theorem, accompanied by a caption that read, "When they tried to break her, she showed them genius." Dr. Hale and Professor Cross stammered through their responses, trying to justify their actions, without admitting fault. But the evidence against them was undeniable, and the pressure mounted with each passing hour. Calls for accountability grew louder, both within the university and beyond. Alumni associations issued statements condemning the incident, while student groups organized protests demanding systemic change. Through it all, Layla remained focused on her studies. She attended classes, completed assignments, and continued mentoring younger students in her free time. While the attention surrounding her was flattering, she refused to let it distract her from her goals. In fact, she saw it as an opportunity to use her platform to advocate for underrepresented voices in STEM fields, to inspire others to pursue their passions despite obstacles, and to remind everyone that true greatness comes not from privilege, but from perseverance. As the days turned into weeks, the fallout from the incident continued to unfold. Faculty meetings became heated debates about diversity and inclusion, with some professors advocating for sweeping reforms while others resisted change. Student-led initiatives gained momentum, pushing for more equitable practices in admissions, hiring, and curriculum development. Slowly but surely, the culture at Sterling University began to shift, and through it all, Layla stood firm, a beacon of hope and resilience in a world too often clouded by prejudice. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was clear: she had already left an indelible mark on those around her. What started as an attempt to humiliate her had transformed into a catalyst for transformation, a reminder that brilliance, when given the chance to shine, can illuminate even the darkest corners. The storm that followed the live problem-solving session at Sterling University was unlike anything the institution had seen in decades. What began as a seemingly ordinary academic exercise quickly spiraled into a national conversation about bias, privilege, and systemic discrimination in higher education. For Layla Thompson, the spotlight intensified with each passing day, but she remained steadfast, choosing to focus on her studies while letting the world react around her. Dr. Marcus Hale and Professor Evelyn Cross found themselves at the center of the controversy, their actions dissected and criticized from every angle. The viral footage of Layla solving the unsolvable theorem spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Memes, hashtags, and think pieces dominated online spaces, many of them highlighting the stark contrast between Layla's brilliance and the professor's attempts to undermine her. One particularly popular hashtag, "Genius Knows No Color," became a rallying cry for advocates of diversity in STEM fields. It wasn't long before news outlets picked up the story, turning what had been a localized incident into a nationwide debate. At first, Dr. Hale and Professor Cross tried to downplay the situation. During a hastily arranged press conference, they claimed that the event had been nothing more than an educational exercise designed to challenge students intellectually. "We never intended to embarrass anyone," Dr. Hale insisted, his voice tinged with defensiveness. "Our goal was simply to push our students to think critically and creatively." Professor Cross echoed his sentiment, though her tone carried a hint of condescension. "Miss Thompson performed admirably," she said, careful to avoid any language that might further incriminate them. "But let's not forget that this is a university. We're here to foster growth, not coddle egos." Their explanations fell flat, met with skepticism and outrage from both inside and outside the university community. Students who had witnessed the session firsthand spoke out, recounting instances of subtle and sometimes blatant discrimination they had experienced under the tutelage of these professors. Alumni joined the chorus, sharing stories of feeling excluded or dismissed during their time at Sterling. Even some faculty members broke ranks, criticizing Dr. Hale and Professor Cross for allowing their biases to influence their professional conduct. As public pressure mounted, Sterling University's administration had no choice but to act. The Sadim dean launched an internal investigation, vowing to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. Committees were formed, testimonies were gathered, and documents reviewed in painstaking detail. The process dragged on for weeks, casting a shadow over the entire campus. Classes continued, but the atmosphere was tense, charged with anger, frustration, and uncertainty. For Layla, navigating this period was challenging. On one hand, she was inundated with messages of support from friends, family, strangers, and even prominent figures in the mathematics community. A Nobel laureate in physics reached out to commend her work, calling it a triumph of intellect and character. Another renowned mathematician invited her to speak at an upcoming conference, eager to showcase her talent to a wider audience. These gestures buoyed her spirits, reminding her that her achievements mattered beyond the confines of Sterling University. On the other hand, the constant attention took its toll. Reporters camped outside her dormitory, hoping to catch a glimpse of the calculus genius who had taken the academic world by storm. Social media threads dissected her every move, speculating about how she felt or what she planned to do next. Some comments were supportive, but others veered into uncomfortable territory, questioning whether she deserved the accolades or suggesting that her success was somehow diminished by external factors. Despite her best efforts to stay focused, it was impossible to ignore the noise entirely. Amidst the chaos, Layla leaned heavily on her support system. Her parents, though initially overwhelmed by the sudden fame, reminded her of why she had embarked on this journey in the first place, to create opportunities for herself and inspire others along the way. Friends rallied around her, shielding her from intrusive questions and offering a sense of normalcy when everything else felt chaotic. And her math professor, Dr. Elena Martinez, a kind-hearted woman known for championing underrepresented students, became a trusted confidant, guiding Layla through the whirlwind with wisdom and grace. Eventually, the results of the university's investigation came to light. Both Dr. Hale and Professor Cross were found guilty of professional misconduct, their actions deemed inconsistent with the values of inclusivity and fairness espoused by Sterling University. As punishment, they were stripped of certain privileges, including leadership roles in key departments and the ability to oversee high-profile events. Additionally, they were required to undergo sensitivity training and participate in workshops focused on addressing implicit bias. While the sanctions were significant, critics argued that they weren't severe enough. They shouldn't just lose privileges. They should lose their jobs, one student wrote in an op-ed for the university newspaper. What they did wasn't just unethical, it was harmful. How can we trust them to teach future generations when they clearly don't believe in equality? Despite the backlash, the university stopped short of firing the professors, citing procedural constraints and tenure protections. Instead, Administrators vowed to implement broader reforms aimed at preventing similar incidents in the future. New policies were introduced to promote transparency in faculty-student interactions, and mandatory training programs were rolled out for all staff members. Scholarships and mentorship initiatives targeting underrepresented groups were expanded, signaling a commitment to fostering a more inclusive environment. For Layla, the outcome was bittersweet. She appreciated the steps being taken to address the issue, but she couldn't help but feel that justice hadn't been fully served. Still, she chose to channel her energy into positive action rather than dwell on resentment. Drawing inspiration from the outpouring of support she had received, she founded a mentorship program called Math Without Barriers. The initiative paired underrepresented students with mentors in STEM fields, providing guidance, resources, and encouragement to help them navigate the challenges of academia. Word of the program spread quickly, attracting interest from universities across the country. Donations poured in, enabling Layla to expand its reach and impact. Within months, Math Without Barriers became a beacon of hope for countless young people who, like Layla, had faced obstacles in pursuing their dreams. Testimonials poured in from participants, thanking her for creating a space where they felt seen, valued, and empowered. Back at Sterling University, the ripple effects of Layla's triumph continued to reshape the institution. Faculty meetings, once dominated by rigid traditions, now included discussions about equity and representation. Student organizations gained momentum, advocating for policy changes and greater accountability. Slowly but surely, the culture began to shift, driven by a collective desire to learn from past mistakes and build a better future. Even Dr. Hale and Professor Cross, humbled by the experience, made tentative efforts to mend fences. Though their reputations had been tarnished, they grudgingly acknowledged the need for change. In private conversations with colleagues, they admitted to underestimating Layla, not just her abilities, but her resilience and determination. Publicly, they issued formal apologies, though these were met with mixed reactions. Some saw them as sincere attempts at redemption. Others dismissed them as too little, too late. Through it all, Layla remained focused on her goals. She attended classes, aced exams, and continued mentoring younger students, proving time and again that her success was no fluke. But she also understood the weight of her role as a trailblazer. Every equation she solved, every lecture she delivered, every interaction she had with peers and professors carried significance, not just for her, but for everyone watching. By the end of the semester, the dust had begun to settle. The initial frenzy of media coverage gave way to quieter reflections on what had happened and what it meant for the future. Layla's name became synonymous with perseverance and excellence, a reminder that brilliance cannot be contained or diminished by prejudice, and while the scars of the incident would linger for years to come, they served as a testament to the power of courage, integrity, and unwavering belief in oneself. In the end, the fallout wasn't just about holding individuals accountable. It was about sparking a movement to challenge outdated norms, dismantle barriers, and create spaces where everyone could thrive. And at the heart of it all stood Layla Thompson, a young woman whose love for mathematics had transformed not only her life but the lives of countless others. The months that followed the incident at Sterling University were transformative, not just for Layla Thompson, but for the entire institution. Change, though slow and often painful, began to take root in ways that no one could have predicted. The university, once a bastion of tradition and elitism, was forced to confront its shortcomings head-on. For Layla, this period marked a delicate balance between personal growth and public advocacy, as she navigated her newfound role as both a student and a symbol of resilience. Dr. Marcus Hale and Professor Evelyn Cross, now stripped of their former influence, retreated into relative obscurity within the faculty ranks. Their names were rarely mentioned without whispers of the scandal that had tarnished their reputations. While neither resigned, they found themselves marginalized, reassigned to less prominent roles, excluded from decision-making processes, and subjected to increased scrutiny. Sensitivity training sessions became a regular part of their schedules, though whether these efforts truly changed their perspectives remained an open question. Still, there were moments when they seemed to grapple with genuine remorse. During one faculty meeting, Dr. Hale hesitantly approached Layla after the session ended. His usual confidence was replaced by awkwardness, his hands fidgeting as he struggled to find the right words. "Miss Thompson," he began, his voice low, "I want to apologize for what happened. It's clear now that I underestimated you, and I regret any harm my actions may have caused." Layla looked at him calmly, her expression unreadable. She didn't respond immediately, instead taking a moment to process his words. When she finally spoke, her tone was measured but firm. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "But apologies aren't enough unless they're followed by action. If you really mean it, then show it, by supporting students like me, not doubting us." Her response left Dr. Hale visibly shaken, but it also planted a seed of reflection. Over time, small gestures emerged. He started recommending underrepresented students for research opportunities, albeit cautiously and with visible effort. Professor Emma Cross, on the other hand, took longer to come around. Her initial attempts at reconciliation were clumsy and insincere, more about saving face than fostering real change. But as weeks turned into months, she too showed signs of evolution. In a private conversation with Dr. Elena Martinez, Layla's supportive mentor, Professor Cross admitted, "I've spent so much of my career thinking I knew what talent looked like. Now I realize how wrong I was, and how much work I still need to do." For Layla, forgiveness was not something she gave lightly. She understood that true accountability required more than hollow words. It demanded consistent effort and tangible results. Yet she also recognized the importance of giving people a chance to grow, if only because she believed in the possibility of redemption. So while she maintained a cautious distance from both professors, she acknowledged their attempts at reform, even if she remained skeptical of their sincerity. Beyond the faculty dynamics, the ripple effects of Layla's triumph continued to reshape the university culture. Students, inspired by her courage and determination, became more vocal in advocating for systemic change. Protests and petitions led to the formation of diversity task forces, which worked tirelessly to address issues of inclusion and representation. New policies were implemented to ensure fair treatment of all students, regardless of their backgrounds. Bias training became mandatory for faculty members, and recruitment efforts were expanded to attract a broader range of applicants. One of the most significant changes came in the form of scholarships and mentorship programs aimed at underrepresented groups. Layla's own initiative, Math Without Barriers, gained widespread recognition and support. The program flourished, connecting hundreds of students with mentors who shared their struggles and aspirations. Success stories poured in, from young women breaking gender barriers in engineering to first-generation college students excelling in advanced sciences. Each achievement reinforced the message that talent knows no boundaries, and opportunity should be accessible to all. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Not everyone welcomed the changes with open arms. Some faculty members resisted the shift toward inclusivity, viewing it as a threat to academic rigor or intellectual purity. Anonymous op-eds appeared in the university newspaper, criticizing the reforms as lowering standards or pandering to political correctness. These voices, though fewer in number, highlighted the ongoing battle between tradition and transformation. Layla faced her share of pushback as well. As her profile grew, so did the expectations placed upon her. Critics scrutinized her every move, questioning whether she deserved the accolades or suggesting that her success was somehow diminished by external factors. Some accused her of using the incident to gain attention, ignoring the fact that she had never sought the spotlight in the first place. Through it all, she remained steadfast, refusing to let negativity derail her mission. Her resilience earned her admiration from unexpected quarters. Even some of her harshest detractors began to soften their stance, recognizing her contributions to the university community. One professor, who had initially dismissed her as a product of affirmative action, approached her during office hours to express his respect. "I'll admit I was wrong about you," he said candidly. "Your work speaks for itself, and I'm grateful for the example you've set, for all of us." These moments of reconciliation were rare but meaningful, serving as reminders of the power of perseverance and empathy. Layla understood that change wouldn't happen overnight, nor would it be universally accepted. But she also knew that every step forward mattered, no matter how small. By staying true to herself and focusing on her goals, she inspired others to do the same. As her final year at Sterling University approached, Layla reflected on how far she had come and how much farther she still wanted to go. Her journey had been fraught with obstacles, but it had also been filled with moments of triumph and hope. She had proven that brilliance cannot be contained by prejudice, and that determination can overcome even the deepest-seated biases. More importantly, she had shown that one person's courage can spark a movement, challenging systems of exclusion and paving the way for future generations. The scars of the past lingered, but they also served as a reminder of the strength required to heal and rebuild. For Layla, the experience wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving and ensuring that others could do the same. As she prepared to graduate, she carried with her not just a degree, but a legacy of resilience, compassion, and unwavering belief in the power of education to transform lives. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly present new challenges, Layla faced it with the same quiet confidence that had defined her journey thus far. After all, she had already proven that she could rise above adversity, and in doing so, she had ignited a flame that would continue to burn brightly long after. She left Sterling University behind. The years rolled by, and the story of Layla Thompson became more than just a memory. It evolved into a legacy that transcended Sterling University and touched lives far beyond its ivy-covered walls. Graduation day arrived under a cloudless sky, with the sun casting golden light across the campus quad. As Layla walked onto the stage to receive her diploma, applause erupted from the crowd. It wasn't the polite clapping reserved for most graduates. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and sustained, a testament to the impact she had made on everyone who knew her story. Her classmates beamed with pride as she stood there, draped in her cap and gown, looking every bit the poised and accomplished young woman she had become. Parents wiped away tears, professors nodded approvingly, and even strangers in attendance couldn't help but feel moved by the moment. For many, Layla represented something greater than academic success. She embodied resilience, courage, and the unyielding belief that talent could flourish regardless of background or circumstance. But graduation wasn't an endpoint for Layla. It was merely the beginning of the next chapter. With her degree in hand, she set out to pursue her PhD, diving deeper into the world of applied mathematics. Her research focused on algorithmic fairness, a field dedicated to ensuring that technology, particularly artificial intelligence, didn't perpetuate biases against marginalized communities. This work struck a chord globally, drawing attention from tech companies, policymakers, and activists alike. Layla's insights were groundbreaking, offering practical solutions to some of the most pressing ethical dilemmas of the digital age. Her reputation grew rapidly, earning her invitations to speak at international conferences, contribute to policy discussions, and collaborate with leading experts in her field. Yet, despite her skyrocketing fame, Layla remained grounded. She turned down lucrative offers from corporate giants, choosing instead to align herself with organizations committed to social justice and equity. "Math isn't just numbers," she often said during interviews. "It's a tool, a way to solve problems and improve lives. If we use it wisely, we can build a better future for everyone." Back at Sterling University, the changes sparked by Layla's triumph continued to take shape. The institution underwent a cultural transformation, shedding its elitist image and embracing a more inclusive vision. Diversity task forces expanded their reach, implementing programs that supported underrepresented students at every level of their academic journey. Scholarships named after trailblazers like Layla sprang up, providing financial aid and mentorship opportunities to those who might otherwise struggle to access higher education. Faculty hiring practices also shifted, prioritizing candidates who demonstrated not only intellectual rigor, but also a commitment to fostering inclusive environments. Training sessions on unconscious bias became standard protocol, helping educators recognize and address their own prejudices. Slowly but surely, the university transformed into a place where students from all walks of life felt welcome and valued. A stark contrast to the atmosphere Layla had encountered when she first arrived. For Dr. Marcus Hale and Professor Evelyn Cross, the passage of time brought mixed outcomes. Both had worked hard to rebuild their reputations, though neither fully regained the influence they once held. Their attempts at reform were genuine, albeit imperfect, and over time, they earned cautious respect from colleagues and students alike. They began mentoring younger faculty members, sharing lessons learned from their mistakes and encouraging a new generation of educators to approach teaching with empathy and humility. Dr. Hale, in particular, found solace in working with underserved communities. He spearheaded outreach programs aimed at introducing high school students to STEM fields, traveling to schools in low-income neighborhoods to deliver workshops and inspire curiosity. Though his efforts were met with skepticism at first, he persisted, driven by a desire to make amends. Meanwhile, Professor Cross channeled her energy into curriculum development, designing courses that emphasized real-world applications of mathematics and encouraged creative problem-solving. Her classes became popular among students, praised for their accessibility and relevance. As for Layla, her connection to Sterling University never faded. Even as her career took her around the globe, she maintained ties with the institution that had shaped her early years. She returned periodically to deliver guest lectures, participate in panel discussions, and meet with students participating in Math Without Barriers. Each visit reminded her of how far she and the university had come since that fateful day in the lecture hall. One such visit occurred nearly a decade after her graduation. By then, Layla was a household name, celebrated not only for her mathematical genius but also for her advocacy work. When she stepped onto campus, she was greeted by throngs of admirers, young students eager to learn from her, faculty members proud to call her an alumna, and administrators grateful for the role she had played in reshaping the university's identity. During this visit, Layla delivered a keynote address to a packed auditorium. Standing behind the podium, she reflected on her journey with characteristic humility. "When I first came to Sterling University, I didn't know what to expect," she began, her voice steady yet warm. "I faced challenges I hadn't anticipated, doubts about whether I belonged, assumptions about my abilities, and moments when it felt like the odds were stacked against me. But through it all, I held on to one truth: that brilliance has no color, no gender, no socioeconomic status. It exists in all of us, waiting to be nurtured and celebrated." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking murmurs of agreement and nods of understanding. She went on to emphasize the importance of creating spaces where everyone could thrive. "Inclusion isn't just a buzzword," she said. "It's a mindset, a commitment to breaking down barriers and building bridges. And while progress takes time, every step forward matters. So I urge you, to the students, the faculty, the leaders of tomorrow, don't wait for change to happen. Be the change." By the end of her speech, the room erupted in applause, echoing the same sentiment that had greeted her on graduation day. This time, however, the applause carried an added layer of meaning, a recognition of how much had been achieved and how much potential still lay ahead. Layla's legacy extended far beyond Sterling University. Around the world, institutions looked to her story as a blueprint for addressing systemic inequities in education. Conferences dedicated to diversity in STEM fields regularly featured her as a keynote speaker, and documentaries chronicling her journey inspired countless viewers. Young people from underrepresented backgrounds saw themselves in her, finding hope and motivation in her example. Even outside academia, Layla's influence reached unexpected corners. Tech companies adopted principles of algorithmic fairness based on her research. Governments enacted policies to promote inclusivity in education, and grassroots movements used her story to rally support for broader social reforms. Her name became synonymous with perseverance, innovation, and the power of representation. Yet despite her global acclaim, Layla remained true to her roots. She stayed connected to her family, returning home often to share meals and laughter with the people who had supported her from the start. She mentored aspiring mathematicians, offering guidance and encouragement to anyone brave enough to dream big, and she continued to push boundaries in her research, tackling complex problems with the same determination that had defined her early days at Sterling. Looking back, Layla understood that her journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every challenge, every obstacle, every moment of doubt had led her here, to a life filled with purpose, impact, and fulfillment. She had proven that brilliance cannot be contained by prejudice, and that resilience can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of discrimination. And so, as Layla Thompson's story unfolded, it served as a reminder, a beacon of hope, that greatness is not determined by privilege or circumstance. It is forged through hard work, fueled by passion, and sustained by the unwavering belief that no matter where you come from, your potential is limitless.